As Donald Trump awaits sentencing in New York, he's openly musing about the possibility of prosecuting political opponents if he's reelected. Here's how he responded when a reporter in Arizona asked him about jailing his rivals.
The world is different now. They're doing things that were never done. They're doing what they do in third world countries. The only reason they brought the case is because I ran for election. It could have been brought 7 years ago. There would have been nothing to say, but nobody wanted to bring it because there is no case. There was no crime. So when you ask me the question, would we do it? I'll talk to you in about 3 years from now.
So here's a quick fact check, folks. Trump was charged in New York because the evidence led to prosecutors to believe that he committed a serious crime. Not because he was running for president, not because he was running for office. And they couldn't bring the case 7 years ago because he was the president of the United States at the time. Now, more important is the desire for retribution. That's the thing. And how it underscores so much of Trump's attacks on our institutions. That has become a central pillar of his 2024 campaign. Joining us now, MSNBC legal analyst and former prosecutor Charles Coleman, and Lawfare's legal fellow and courts correspondent Anna Bower. Welcome to you both. I know, right? That's just...
Charles, you're a former prosecutor. Do you think prosecutors should be concerned that if Donald Trump wins election, that he will go after them? Do you think they should take him at his word?
Simone, I think that not only should prosecutors be concerned, but I think the entire electorate and by larger measure, the entire American people should be concerned. I think Donald Trump has shown that he is someone who, when he says he's going to do something, regardless of how ridiculous it is, he's going to do it. And particularly if you look at the judiciary and Dobbs and everything else that occurred during his administration, we have the evidence that this is someone who intends to enact whatever it is he has to in order to keep his word in that regard. So this is something that, even as ridiculous as it sounds, should cause for extreme amounts of concern. As I listened to him during that voiceover just a moment ago, I thought to myself, Donald Trump ran for president because they brought the charges. It wasn't that they brought the charges because Donald Trump ran for president. And I think that he will make and do and construct any maneuvers necessary in order to enact his retribution, as he says, on the judiciary for whatever it is he feels that they have unjustly done to him as persecution rather than prosecution.
And here's the thing, Anna, it is not just Trump, it is his cronies. Take a listen to what Miller and Bannon had to say.
Unless Republicans unshackle themselves from their self-imposed restraints and are as ruthless in fighting to save America as the Democrats are in fighting to destroy America. Every facet of Republican Party politics and power has to be used right now to go toe-to-toe with Marxism and beat these communists.
All of this is about one thing. This is about shutting down the MAGA movement, shutting down grassroots conservatives, shutting down President Trump. There's not a prison built or a jail built that will ever shut me up. All victory to MAGA.
All victory to MAGA. And I'm sorry, it is real early in the morning to have to hear from those two. So my apologies to folks at home, but I do think it is important to hear the way they're talking about this. And the other thing that strikes me, Anna, is that it used to sort of be vague threats of prosecution. About a year ago, you had the former president saying that he would go after President Biden. You now have him adding by name Hillary Clinton to that list, adding Alvin Bragg to that list. The threat is becoming increasingly specific.
It is becoming increasingly specific, and it's really chilling rhetoric to hear. You know, you hear this, and it undermines the rule of law, this rhetoric. But I think what's important, too, is that Trump, if he is elected, what's going to matter is who the people are around him. So people like maybe Steve Bannon. And he knows from his previous administration that if he selects people who push back against him, who are going to be willing to stop him, he's not going to get what he wants. And so I think this time around, one of the things that's going to be very different as there are these promises of retribution being made is that Trump is going to be thinking about who it is that he's going to be putting in his potential administration. And he's this time around, I think, going to be much less willing to put people in power who are going to say no.
Charles, here's my thing with all of this. The fact that we still talk about this almost as if it's this universe of MAGA and Trump, and then there's the Democrats trying to battle them. But at the core of it is a political party and institutions that support that party, Heritage, for example, that are hell-bent on one thing: retribution, payback. You've got the New York Times noting by Jonathan Swan and Maggie Haberman and Charlie Savage the intensity of anger and open desire for using the criminal justice system against Democrats after the verdict surpasses anything seen before in Trump's tumultuous years in national politics. What is different now is the range of Republicans who are saying retaliation is necessary and who are no longer cloaking their intent with euphemism. Couple of things. What the hell are they so angry about? When they had control of both the House, the Senate, and the White House, they did nothing with it. They did not, all of this, we're going to change, we're going to put in these policies. It didn't happen. Yet and still, the American people sit back and they look at this and they're like, let's do it again. Let's put the same people. You listen to Miller, you listen to Bannon, and the American people are saying, yeah, give me more of that. Because right now, Donald Trump and Joe Biden are tied, or Trump is slightly ahead, because people are paying, what, $1 more for gas. So this, how do you break this? How do you get people to understand what this means for the criminal justice system, what it means under the rule of law, what it means when a president, a former president running for office again, wants to throw people in jail? Because it's not just going to be the people they see on television. This will extend to everybody else downstream and around the country.
Michael, my well-suited friend, I have to say that we have to take a step back, and I'm glad you framed that question the way that you did, because Republicans have shown that they want to have the authority of a room of tyrants, but they want to have the accountability of a room of toddlers. And what I mean by that is, if you remember, during midterm elections, I said that Republicans were politicizing the issue of crime and justice in America. And people got mad at me for saying it. I said it was politicized and it was racialized. And we have seen that play out on the national scale, particularly in the wake of Donald Trump's conviction here in New York. We cannot enter into a space any further where we are allowing the justice system, which is supposed to be fair, balanced, and equal, to be used as a political weapon. And that's ultimately what Republicans are seeking to do. They realize that when it does speak toward the notion of accountability, there is a possibility that their leading candidate is going to be put in jail or at least held accountable under the rule of law. And so what do they want to do? Not only do they want to change the rules, but they also want to seek to essentially have him use it as a weapon and have that party do the same. And that is deeply troubling for all of us who understand what the separations of power are supposed to be and what the true purpose of our criminal justice system should be.
I mean, we will talk on the other side about specifically Alvin Bragg and how they are trying to put that, what you are saying, into action. And stick around. Charles, Anna, they're not going anywhere. We have more to discuss with you in just a moment. But first, we have some breaking news just in the last few minutes in Paris. We did get some video of President Biden and French President Emmanuel Macron during their bilateral meeting. Now, according to the pool report from the reporters who were there with the two world leaders, they were seated across from one another in a garden. This was billed as a coffee, but there was actually no coffee on the table. President Biden was talking, but his voice was too low to hear what he was saying. The only snippet heard by the radio pooler, Tamara Keith from NPR, was Biden saying, quote, "my last conversation with Xi," referring to President Xi of China. But that's all the pool reporters could hear. We are still expecting to hear formal remarks from both of these world leaders this morning.